Effective assessment basically starts from having a look at your topic outlines for that particular assessment you're setting up. You make sure you've got the coverage of all areas of the various topics. Then I always be very mindful of the syllabus descriptors. You make sure then that you get a good coverage right across from A to E, or probably D, more specifically, for each of those criteria. That's the key thing for a start.
It's about using the exit criteria. It's about making sure that questions are using the language of that exit criteria so that you are drawing out the right response.
When we design our assessment, we have to make certain that we've covered all the standards from A through to E.
From the D question, we're looking at very simple, familiar questions that we've done quite often in class. The C level is obviously just the next step up from there, where they're using simple, routine questions again. However, we don't give those simple cues of given formulas or perhaps rehearse them as much in the classroom. Then I would probably go to the A-type questions, where we're looking at more complex, unrehearsed type scenarios, and we basically have to look at those in both life-related and abstract situations.
Based on syllabus descriptors, for a student to be an A, they have to be able to demonstrate simple routine, they have to be able to demonstrate complex routine, they have to be able to demonstrate simple non-routine across topics, in life-related and in abstract situations.
To get an A rating, obviously, in that particular criteria, it's important that they be able to demonstrate both the life-related and the abstract. If they can only do that in one particular aspect rather than both of them, that would put them down into the B category. The allocation of marks from A to D type questions tends to work on the number of steps that are required to complete that particular question. It's important not just to give part marks for this line to this line to this line. There should be demonstrated techniques that we're actually rewarding. And of course, if a technique is a more difficult one, there'd be more marks allocated to that particular aspect.
I think it's, first of all, in the construction of the questions that we are trying to elicit particular responses. The things that we find key in those responses, we allocate marks. We allocate marks within an A standard question. We allocate marks in a B standard question and allocate marks in a C standard question.
So if a question is asking you to substitute into an equation, which might be a simple routine question, we would allocate marks if they could remember the equation, or half mark, another half mark if they could substitute incorrectly, another half mark for their arithmetic facility, and then maybe another half mark for their answer to make a total of a 2-mark question.
We also expect that marks be allocated in a balanced way to suit the questions that we put on there. So, for example, simple routine style questions, we would expect a certain percentage or number of marks out of the total to be allocated to simple routine. Likewise to simple non-routine, complex routine and complex non-routine.
We find with marks we allocate correctly probably about 95% of the time straight away. But you always want to check the borderline students, particularly those Ds going into C, and I suppose those Bs going into A. But particularly we really look at the Ds going into C.
To make sure that the mark that the students receive aligns with the syllabus standards, it's just very important at the end to go back and look at the student's the student's work on that particular instrument, and just simply match it up with the descriptors.
As far as the cut-offs are concerned, we set them in place. They will generate our results, but we then that gives us on our sheet a provisional grade.
The decision is initially based on arbitrary cut-offs that we've pre-decided, but following from that, decision making needs to occur after that mark or percentage is calculated, and that's an absolutely critical step. It's not just that a student has achieved 84% and gets a B+. If they have met the criteria for an A as described in the standard, then we must give them that A-.
It works probably 90% of the time that the marks that we use and the cut-offs that we do generate the grades that we think are appropriate for their work. There's the occasional one that you have to go back to the criteria, it's a criteria system, and look, have they really achieved it?
The important thing is that what we do also at our school is at the end of the year, when we collect the folio and get the results for that criteria, we make sure we don't simply just add up all the marks across every instrument. That would be silly. Basically, every instrument's a little bit different, weighted differently, and that would give a false idea. At the end of the day, really, it does come back to the fact that looking at the students' work and comparing against the syllabus standards, that's how the decision should be made.